What if the most important lessons for your life were never taught to you? Not because you missed them, but because they were never part of the system in the first place. Think about it. You spent years in school, thousands of hours in classrooms, memorizing formulas, studying history dates, passing exams. But when real life finally began, most people felt strangely unprepared. Money decisions, confidence, handling stress, understanding people, knowing what you actually want to do with your life. Suddenly the questions became bigger, and the answers weren't on any test. Have you ever had that moment? Where you realize you followed the path exactly the way you were told, yet something still feels off? Almost like you were trained to pass exams, but not trained to build a life. Take a second with that, because this realization hits many people quietly, usually in their 20s, sometimes in their 30s, occasionally much later. You wake up one morning and think, wait, why didn't anyone teach me how to handle this? How to manage money, how to control your mind when anxiety hits, how to deal with failure without feeling like your entire identity collapsed, how to choose a career that actually fits who you are. And suddenly, something becomes clear. School prepared you for a system, but life doesn't run like a system. Life runs on decisions. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people keep waiting for someone else to give them permission to make those decisions. They wait for instructions, for a teacher, for a roadmap. But real life rarely hands you one. Now here's the strange part. The lessons that shape your future are often the ones nobody formally teaches. Things like understanding how your habits shape your identity, learning how attention controls your life, realizing that the people around you influence your direction more than you think, and discovering that confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build through action. But wait until you hear this. The biggest lesson school often misses is how to think. Not what to think, how to think. There's a massive difference. Memorizing information trains your memory, but learning how to question things, how to analyze decisions, how to understand your own mind, that's a completely different skill. And that skill changes everything. Because once you learn how to think clearly, you stop blindly following paths that don't belong to you. Let me ask you something honestly. How many people do you know who chose their career simply because it felt like the next logical step? Good grades, good college, good job, stable life. On paper, it makes perfect sense. But inside, something still feels unfinished. Like a part of them is waiting to wake up. And maybe you felt that too. That quiet voice asking, is this really what I meant to do? Now, this doesn't mean everyone needs to abandon their job tomorrow and chase some dramatic dream. That's not the point. The point is awareness. Because the moment you begin questioning the default path, you gain something most people never develop. Ownership. Ownership of your direction. Ownership of your habits. Ownership of your future. And that's when life becomes interesting. But this is where the story gets difficult. Because once you start thinking independently, you also start noticing something uncomfortable. Many of the rules you've been following were never designed for your personal happiness. They were designed for stability, predictability, order. Now, stability isn't bad, but if stability becomes the only goal, growth disappears. And suddenly people spend decades living safely, but not fully. So here's the real question. What if the most valuable education of your life starts after school ends? What if the real curriculum includes things like understanding fear, building discipline, learning how to fail without quitting, choosing your environment wisely, and discovering what actually gives your life meaning? Think about that for a moment. Because most people spend years waiting for life to become clear. But clarity rarely arrives on its own. It appears through exploration, through mistakes, through moments where you try something and realize it's not for you. Now here's the part nobody tells you. Those moments aren't failures. They're navigation. Every wrong turn teaches you something about the right direction. But there's a catch. The world often makes experimentation feel risky. What if I choose the wrong path? What if I fall behind? What if I fail? Those fears are powerful. But wait until you hear the bigger risk. The bigger risk is spending your entire life following a path you never chose consciously, and one day wondering, how did I end up here? That thought alone is enough to wake people up. But through experiences, through ideas, through lessons that reshape how you see the world. And once that shift begins, everything changes. But before that transformation happens, there's one obstacle that stops most people from ever starting. And it's far more subtle than you think. It's not intelligence. It's not opportunity. It's something hiding inside your daily habits. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. The obstacle that stops most people from learning what school never taught them is comfort. Not the relaxing kind, the invisible kind. The kind that quietly convinces you to stay exactly where you are. Because here's something strange about the human mind. It prefers familiarity over improvement, even when that familiarity keeps you stuck. Think about your typical day. You wake up, check your phone, scroll for a few minutes, maybe a few more. Then the day begins rushing forward. Work, messages, notifications, more scrolling when there's a free moment. And before you know it, the day is gone. Now here's a question most people avoid asking themselves. Where did your attention actually go today? Not your time, your attention. Because attention is the currency of your life. Where it goes, your future follows. But wait, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The modern world is designed to capture your attention, not protect it. Every notification, every endless scroll, every algorithm, all competing for one thing, your focus. And when your attention becomes scattered, your life becomes scattered too. You start many things, but finish very few. Ideas appear, but action disappears. Plans exist, but progress stalls. Does that feel familiar? Be honest for a second. How often do you open your phone for something quick, and suddenly 20 minutes disappear? Almost like your brain went on autopilot. It's not just you. Millions of people live inside that pattern every day. And here's the deeper problem. When your attention is constantly pulled outward, you rarely spend time thinking inward. And that's where the real lessons live. The lessons about your goals, your fears, your habits, your direction. But if every quiet moment is filled with noise, those lessons never surface. And that's when life starts feeling strangely confusing. People say things like, I don't know what I want to do. I feel lost. I feel behind. But often the problem isn't lack of ability, it's lack of reflection. Now this next part is important, because doing what school never taught you requires one powerful shift. You must learn how to pause, not in a lazy way, in a thinking way. The ability to step back from constant stimulation and ask yourself real questions. Questions like, what am I actually building with my time? Who are the people influencing my mindset? What habits are shaping the person I'm becoming? Most people never ask these questions seriously, because asking them means facing uncomfortable answers. But this is exactly where growth begins. And here's the ironic part. The world often celebrates being busy, but busy doesn't always mean productive. Sometimes it just means distracted. Now here's a small experiment. Imagine two people living their lives. The first person follows the default pattern. Constant input, endless content, quick entertainment whenever boredom appears. The second person protects small moments of silence. They read, they think, they learn, they reflect on their decisions. At first, these two lives look identical, but give it 5 years. The difference becomes obvious, because the second person slowly develops something powerful. Clarity. Clarity about what they want. Clarity about what actually matters. clarity about which opportunities to say yes to and which to ignore. And clarity is rare, extremely rare. Now here's a thought most people never consider. Your life is not just shaped by what you do, it's shaped by what you pay attention to. Attention creates awareness. Awareness creates direction. Direction creates progress. But this is where most people hesitate, because once you become aware of how your attention is being used, you realize something difficult. You're responsible for it. And responsibility can feel heavy. It means you can't blame your circumstances forever. You can't blame the system forever. You can't blame your past forever. At some point, you become the designer of your own education. Now, before that sounds overwhelming, here's the encouraging part. You don't need to learn everything at once. You only need to start noticing patterns. Patterns in your habits. Patterns in your thinking. Patterns in the environments that shape you. And once you start noticing those patterns, a powerful shift begins. You stop living reactively. You start living intentionally. But here's where the journey gets interesting. Because once people begin thinking independently, some of the most limiting lessons people learn in school are never written in a textbook. They're subtle, unspoken, but powerful. Lessons like, follow the safe path, don't make mistakes, get the right answers. At first, those ideas sound reasonable, but when they follow you into adulthood, they quietly shape how you live. Because if you were trained to avoid mistakes, you'll start avoiding risks. If you were trained to follow instructions, you'll hesitate to create your own direction. If you were trained to look for the correct answer, you might struggle when life asks open-ended questions. And here's the problem. Real life rarely offers multiple-choice answers. Careers change. Industries evolve. Relationships get complicated. Opportunities appear in places nobody predicted. The world rewards adaptability. But many people were trained for certainty. Do you see the conflict? Now, here's a question worth thinking about. Why do so many adults feel terrified of failure? Seriously. Why does failing at something feel so personal? Part of the answer goes back to how success was defined early on. Good grade equals success. Bad grade equals failure. Pass the test, you're smart. Fail the test, something is wrong. Over time, that message becomes internal. Failure stops feeling like feedback. It starts feeling like identity. I failed quietly becomes, I am a failure. Now pause for a moment. Has that thought ever crossed your mind after something didn't work out? A project didn't succeed. A goal didn't happen. A plan fell apart. And suddenly the inner voice appears. Maybe I'm just not good enough. That voice is more common than people admit. Most people carry it quietly. Now here's where things start to change. Because one of the most powerful lessons school rarely teaches is this. Failure is information, not identity. Think about it. Every skill you have today was built through mistakes. Walking, speaking, learning anything new. You didn't master those things by getting everything right the first time. You learned by adjusting, trying again, and improving through feedback. But somewhere along the way, many people stopped allowing themselves to learn like that. They became afraid of looking foolish, afraid of trying something new, afraid of stepping outside what they already know. And ironically, that fear becomes the very thing that keeps them stuck. Now here's something interesting. The people who build extraordinary lives often share one unusual trait. They experiment, constantly. Not recklessly, but curiously. They try ideas, explore paths, test possibilities. Some things work, many things don't. But every attempt gives them information. And information leads to better decisions. But wait until you hear this. The biggest breakthroughs in life rarely come from certainty. They come from curiosity. Curiosity asks questions like, what happens if I try this? What could I learn from this experience? What if the path I'm looking for doesn't exist yet, and I have to create it? Those questions unlock possibilities most people never explore. Now let me ask you something honestly. How often do you allow yourself to explore something purely because it interests you? Not because it's required, not because it's expected, just because you're curious. Think about it for a moment. Many people stop doing that after school. They become efficient, responsible, busy, but curiosity quietly fades. And without curiosity, growth slows down. But this is where the journey begins to shift. Because once you reconnect with curiosity, life starts feeling different. You stop asking, what's the safest choice? And you begin asking, what's the most interesting possibility? That change alone can open doors you never expected. But here's the twist. The moment you start thinking this way, another obstacle appears. Doubt. Your mind will question everything. What if I'm too late? What if other people are already ahead? What if I try and it doesn't work? Those thoughts are normal. Everyone who steps outside the default path faces them. But here's the realization that changes everything. You're not competing with everyone. You're competing with the version of yourself who never tries. And that version always stays comfortable, but rarely fulfilled. Now imagine something. 5 years from today, 2 possible futures exist. In one future, you keep waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect plan, and life continues, mostly the same. In the other future, you begin experimenting, learning things school never taught you, exploring ideas, testing your limits, slowly discovering who you actually want to become. Which future sounds more alive? Don't answer quickly. Think about it. Because the next realization changes how you approach everything. Once you stop waiting for permission, you realize something powerful. Once you stop seeing yourself as just a product of the system, something powerful begins to happen. You start seeing yourself as the designer of your own life. Not overnight, not perfectly, but gradually. Because the truth is, life becomes very different when you stop waiting to be told what to do next. Think about how most paths begin. School gives you a schedule. Classes tell you what to study. Tests tell you what matters. There's always a structure, always a next step. But when adulthood arrives, that structure disappears. Suddenly nobody tells you what skill you should learn next, what mindset you should develop, what habits will shape your future. And that freedom can feel confusing at first, almost like being dropped into the middle of a game without knowing the rules. So people do the most natural thing. They look around. They copy what everyone else seems to be doing. Get a job, stay busy, follow the same routines. And there's nothing wrong with working hard. But here's the question many people never pause to ask. Is this routine building the life I actually want? Or am I just repeating the default pattern? Be honest with yourself for a second. Almost like life was happening automatically. Wake up, work, rest, repeat. Days turn into months, months turn into years, and suddenly time starts moving faster. Now here's the part most people don't expect. It comes from lack of intention. Reading a new idea becomes exciting. Trying a skill feels energizing. Meeting people with different perspectives expands your thinking. Life begins to feel like exploration again. But this transformation requires one thing most people resist: responsibility. Not the heavy kind, the empowering kind. The realization that you are responsible for your growth, for your mindset, for the habits shaping your future. And strangely enough, that responsibility is also freedom. Because if you are responsible, then you are also capable of change. Now pause for a moment. Think about the person you were 5 years ago. Your mindset was different. Your knowledge was different. Your priorities were different. Which means something important. You are not fixed. You are evolving. Constantly. And the direction of that evolution depends on what you feed your mind, the ideas you explore, the people you listen to, the challenges you allow yourself to face. That's the real education most people never receive. Not information, transformation. Learning how to shape your own thinking, learning how to adapt, learning how to rebuild yourself when life knocks you down. And trust me, life will do that sometimes. Everyone experiences setbacks. Plans collapse. Opportunities disappear. Unexpected problems appear. But the difference between people who stay stuck and people who grow through those moments is perspective. One group sees failure as proof they should stop. The other sees failure as feedback for improvement. Now here's the surprising part. The people who grow the most are not the ones who avoid difficulty. They're the ones who become curious about it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can this teach me?" That question alone can transform a problem into a lesson. And over time, those lessons compound. Confidence grows, clarity improves, resilience strengthens, until one day you notice something surprising. Life no longer feels like something that's happening to you. It feels like something you're actively shaping. But here's the most important realization of all. Nobody hands you this awareness. You discover it, usually after questioning the path you were given, after noticing the gaps in what you were taught, after realizing that the most valuable lessons are often the ones you teach yourself. And that realization changes everything. Because once you understand that your life is an ongoing education, you stop fearing the unknown. You start welcoming it. Every experience becomes information. Every challenge becomes training. Every mistake becomes a lesson. And slowly, quietly, you begin building a life that actually belongs to you. Not one designed by expectations, not one shaped by pressure, but one created through conscious decisions. So here's the real takeaway. School may teach you how to pass tests, but life teaches you how to understand yourself. And the moment you start learning those lessons intentionally, you stop feeling lost. You start feeling awake. And if this realization hits something inside you, don't just scroll past it. Let it stay with you for a moment. Because sometimes the most powerful change in life begins with a single new way of thinking. And if this message spoke to you in some way, stay here, keep exploring, and start choosing the lessons that move your life forward.